Hi, this is Dr. Sarita Jackson with the 7th episode of GRIT Group Live. Today, I want to talk about this one question. It only took one question that has had an impact on GRIT and understanding of what's going on with international trade in 2020 that I want to talk to you about this afternoon. So thank you for spending a few moments of your time with me to hear this story and how GRIT has evolved so that GRIT can continue to be of greater service to your company, especially for those of you looking to expand to the international market. A few weeks ago, I was on a Zoom call, and now many of us are constantly on Zoom calls, particularly with connecting with other businesses, business colleagues, our clients, and things of that nature. And on this particular call, a lot of times when we're having our discussions, the focus is mainly on what's going on in our particular field. What is happening in the field, for example, with me, in the field of international trade. And so I often talk about some of the issues that I have already mentioned on some of my earlier GRIT Group Live sessions about the increased role for particular services, where even though we're hearing about a disruption in international trade, the disruption in the supply chain, that certain services are still being imported and exported. I've also talked about digital trade. But it took one question in actually two of these conversations. Can you actually help this medical company, I know a medical company, to import or export some of their products, import into the United States or export to the overseas market? Now that question forced me to rethink how I run GRIT. Now, what is it that's different about that question? Yeah, GRIT, you focus on import and export. But just as the name indicates of the company, it is a research institute. It's a think tank. And I take that research to advise companies, to consult with these companies, but to actually show them why they're doing what they're doing, why one strategy would work over the other. But what was so loaded in that question is that it takes us on a more it's about transaction, actually helping companies with the transaction. Now, most of my clients are food manufacturers and they're small businesses. But what has been going on as a result of that one question, to which I replied yes, was that it focuses on the transactions now of import and export. So why is this significant? Well, one, that things that I'm sharing, especially over the last few months and in this particular session, are things that I am learning so that GRIT can continue to be of service, even amidst all of the uncertainty in 2020, that GRIT can be of service. But the best way that I can be of service is to actually show that I can run my company, continue to grow in a time of uncertainty, so that I can continue to serve my clients and just the general public, even through a lot of the complementary information that I provide. So with the information that I'm sharing is about this idea of pivot. And that has been a big discussion about how companies have had to alter their strategies, rethink their business models, how to plan for the next, let's say, 90 days, and so that they can just stay afloat with everything that is going on. And of course, as I always say, well, even in times of uncertainty, the one certain thing is you have to do your research. So the research component is not out of GRIT, but what is added to GRIT's model now as a result of this question and the opportunities that have emerged since that question has been raised to me twice, and I've answered with a confident yes, is that GRIIT has also had to pivot. And what I mean by that is pivoting to a completely different industry. So as I mentioned earlier, most of the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years, let's say, with most of the clients have been in the food manufacturing space. And then some clients that I still talk to just to kind of help guide them through what's going on. For example, last week I was happy to talk to one of my clients, and he's still able to maneuver and continue progressing, moving forward, that he has decided, I'm not just going to stop, I'm going to do what I can, even in the current environment and the international economy, that I'm going to do what I can. So, but most of the clients have been in the food manufacturing space. So my pivot is to a completely different industry. My pivot is in terms of working now with larger companies. So still dealing with the small businesses, but to be able to move up. If you recall that toward the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I kept putting out this whole model of level up 2020. So to be able to work with some of the larger companies and actually in one particular case, a corporation. So that has been another pivot, having to adjust. Okay, so now I'm working with larger companies. Let's make sure that I'm able to meet the needs of those companies, but then also making the transition, or not necessarily the transition, but adding to what GRIIT does, not just in terms of the research, but actually being able to be engaged in the transactions to help a company that is looking to import particular products from countries around the world to sell here in the United States, or to actually identify other markets overseas where they can sell their products, where they may already be selling here in the United States and may want to expand overseas because there is a need for that particular product. So that is the third pivot. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that, again, using the work that I'm doing and the work that GRIIT is doing, is the need for a company to be open to new ideas and expand. And I'm going to talk about why I mention that. That's nothing earth-shattering. But nonetheless, when it comes to putting it into practice, it's amazing some of the things that I've heard ever since, let's go back to March, right? Where at the start of, at least here in the United States, where the pandemic was taken much more seriously, we started to have lockdowns, things transitioned rapidly to virtual, to using digital technology, operating in a virtual space. And I realized from talking to some people, not all, many people have understood the transition or were already prepared, but then there are some that still have the mindset of a traditional approach. And so I'm mentioning that to talk about the need for expanding, being open to new ideas, to continue to grow even amidst everything that is going on in the current year. And then the second point that I usually say is that trade is still happening. Yes, some industries have been more affected than others. Nonetheless, trade is still going on. Even if you follow my Facebook page on a regular basis, and I'm just glancing here because I see some people, additional people just checking in. So I always want to say hello, don't want to leave them. For those of you who are logging in and watching, hello, good afternoon. So the thing that I wanted to, let me make sure I'm not missing anyone, but that I wanted to just make sure here is, if you look at my Facebook Live page or Facebook page, you will often see on a regular basis, Monday through Saturday, where I have a series called Trends in Trade. And that keeps the followers updated as to what is going on in the area of international trade. And there's constantly things to post for each of the regions. So I do it by regions for each particular day. And the reason why that I continue to post that information is for each of the regions, because I get approached about interest in Europe, Asia, Africa, what have you, Latin America, and the Caribbean. and even the Middle East, that to continue to show that trade is still going on, that there's still some import, there's still exports, trade is still happening. So it does not mean that in 2020, if you are a company that is looking to import or export, that you just have to stop and wait until next year, stop and see what happens. That business is still going on, but it also goes back to the idea, the first idea of being able to look at what are some other opportunities. It may change your business models somewhat, or it might be a completely new opportunity, but that still complements what you're doing, to be open to those new ideas and to expand. But nonetheless, even with GRIIT, with the new opportunities in a completely different industry in the healthcare space, because of people realizing, hey, you do great research, now we need help taking that research to the transactional level. And as I said, I just said yes, seize upon this opportunity. But nonetheless, research is still required to seize upon those transactional opportunities. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare, what is happening. I'm just going to give a quick overview just so that you can see what is happening in this particular space. So in April of 2020, according to the most recent data that I've been able to collect, that when you're talking about the healthcare space, the first thing that is on everyone's minds are the personal protective equipments, or the PPE. So as of April 2020, with the N95 masks, which are really for the healthcare workers. I've seen people that have gotten the other version, the KN95 masks, but nonetheless, for the N95 mask, that when we look at April 2020, that many of the healthcare facilities here in the United States, 20% in April did not have any supply of the N95 masks. And then 11% of the healthcare facilities here in the United States, only 11% had a little over a 2-week supply. Now, what you're seeing now is the import of the KN95 masks that come in from China. I know that there's a huge influx of imports. Nonetheless, this just gives us a sense of what was taking place when it comes to the masks, the N95 masks. Here, that there was a huge shortage, which presents an opportunity in the case of China to export a similar mask, make sure that it is approved here in the United States, that it's approved to be sold here in the US. Then also for face shields, so there's a whole host of other PPEs. I'm just listing these two. Face shields, for example, that a lot of times that you see many of the healthcare workers or anyone in that space, where they have the coverings, the face coverings, the face shields, that in April of 2020, there was 36% of the healthcare facilities here in the United States reported not even having a supply of the face shields to protect their workers from the COVID-19. And then only 9% of the healthcare facilities actually reported having a little over a 2-week supply. So that shortage has led to opportunities to import PPEs, and then also later on, now we're in the month of June, where companies, if they have a supply, where they can actually export overseas. But before I continue on that, and I will reiterate this toward the end, it presents an opportunity, but it on the transactional side, but still research is involved to understand the certification requirements, what is actually required to make sure that those masks meet certain requirements and that they are approved. And then also, what are the policies when it comes to exporting? Because at the beginning, let's say about March, where you saw that there was some protectionism, where countries were limiting or restricting the export of certain medical equipment and pharmaceuticals. So that is something to also be aware of and make sure that you understand when trying to leverage some of these opportunities. Also, just in terms of the market size, now one of the things that GRIIT has done is, instead of just focusing on the PPE, looking at the market for just medical device manufacturing in total and identifying those opportunities. And I'm excited to actually be putting together a particular proposal for a project to get beyond the PPEs to see, and we'll see where that goes. But nonetheless, the fact that there's the interest that companies are coming to me, and there is the interest when I talk about, hey, there are these other markets that you could consider, and not just within the context of the current health pandemic, but just over the longer term. So with your PPEs and any other kind of devices, right? So when it comes to medical device manufacturing, I'm just going to use one particular product, diagnostic imaging, for example. This is the one that has the largest share of the market here in the United States and the highest projected growth over the next 5 years. So that presents an opportunity. So for 2020, that market, when it comes to diagnostic imaging, is a $52.6 million market. That is projected to increase to $62.4 million by 2025. So I mentioned that. Simple numbers, but just basically where you see within the 5-year period when you're doing your research, you say, okay, what are some of the projections under certain conditions, of course, because as we've seen with 2020, things can change rapidly. So at least when it comes to the diagnostic imaging, that projections show that there should be an increase in terms of the dollar value of that market, and that presents opportunities for those in the medical space, the medical device space, the healthcare industry, and then for companies such as GRIIT to leverage those opportunities to be of service to any company in that particular space. So why is this possible for me now? For me, I'm a research person, usually about the numbers, the facts, just give me the numbers. But one of the things that I've noticed just in terms of also my involvement as the president and CEO of the Global Research Institute of International Trade is that this is possible. The opportunities presented themselves, but what makes it possible for GRIIT to get involved to add not just the research, but also the transaction component so that it could expand my services was a change in my mindset. Now this gets to, one of the things, again, for me, coming from academia and looking at numbers and research, that's mainly what I focus on, research, data. But the thing that I realized when I stop and reflect, so with the slowdown, it allows me to really sit, reflect, what's working, what is not working, what can I improve? And I have a team with me too this year that also helps with that. So that is also helpful where I can bounce ideas off with, exchange of ideas with my team. But the thing when I really thought about it, and actually with the help of someone on my team, was my shift in mentality. Meaning that I'm getting beyond the contacts because I've developed a number of contacts. That was the other thing I was very pleased with when I got involved, when these opportunities from a transactional perspective came up. I could think back to individuals that I've met over the last couple of years, let's say, who could help carry out a project, pick up the phone, hey, there is this project. This is, I can help with this part, but some of the things they're asking is beyond the scope of what I do. So I was so happy to be able to do that. So the contacts, of course, help, the experience and the expertise, but what really helped was the change in my mindset to make the goal of leveling up in 2020 a reality. And so now when I say change in my mindset was that I have the confidence to say, hey, I've done enough work over the years. GRIIT is what this year makes it 7 years of being in business. I am equipped to take on new projects and work with new types of companies, and particularly the larger companies. So that's that. And the way it became more apparent was from conversations that I've had with others at the start of the pandemic here in the US, where we would get together and we would have conversations about how we could support each other. And one of the things with some of the conversations that I noticed, a kind of a common thread with a few, not all, most people were, okay, I'm already prepared. I've done all the work that I need to do. In my case, it was the same thing when everyone was going virtual. I'm like, well, luckily I've already put that in motion in 2019, certain things that I put in place so that I could continue. It wasn't a huge disruption or change for me. But when I would talk to the others, okay, let's lay out a plan with one common thread that I noticed when they would not necessarily come up with a specific roadmap, but it would go into giving advice. And one of the things I said, that may have worked even up until January 2020. Are you not realizing the changes? That traditional model is not working. You have to adjust. And when I would present ideas, and I have someone on my team that gets these ideas when it comes to the marketing, using the digital technology, the social media. When I would talk about those things with a few individuals, they weren't even prepared. One person even mentioned, he says, I am months, I won't say how many months, but months behind you, that I'm still trying to just figure all of this stuff out. But the key thing that I would notice would be this focus on a traditional model, what they know that works instead of what is actually happening now, how to leverage the technology in order to expand, to reach the international market, and to really serve clients. So that's when I realized, okay, in order for me to move forward, I have to change my mentality to be ready, be flexible, to be open, be flexible. So when these opportunities come to me, as opposed to saying, no, I don't have this, I'm not ready, to say yes, because I've already done the work, built up the contacts, and built the structure, if you will, so that I could just move forward quickly and just really be ready to tackle a challenge, and then pull in a team to help. So just like when we talk about the economy being an interdependent one, I've taken the same approach to the internal model, as opposed to I'm either dependent or independent. Like, no, I have to be interdependent, meaning that working with the team, this can make things move much more quickly. I get new ideas, and then I can actually take on new projects, different projects, and continue to move forward and be of service. And it's that same advice that I offer to companies, the small, regardless of size, really, that in the international market, to still be aware that trade is going on, but you're going to have to adjust your thinking, your business model to deal with what is going on, to align with what is going on in the current global economy, and also to think what are some potential opportunities beyond the current global economy. So the 3 months, even 6 months from now, even a year from now, what are some of the things that I could do to stay afloat, to continue to compete in the global economy? So yeah, so I say all of that, with what GRIIT has done, taking on a new addition to my business model altogether. So the tips that I want to leave for you are not just here are opportunities, challenges, all that stuff that we normally hear about when we're looking at what is going on in the international market. But you can reach out to me at grit@grit.org, and grit with 2 I's, if you want to set up a complimentary consultation to find out what are some potential markets, what's happening in markets. I can do that one-on-one. But the 3 tips that I want to leave from today's session about the state of international trade, key thing, trade is still happening. What is going on with GRIIT? Well, as I mentioned earlier, that GRIIT has evolved from just focusing on research to actually becoming more involved in the transactions, the import-export transactions in an altogether different industry. And then what this means for your firm is by GRIIT expanding its services and getting involved in different areas, GRIIT can be of better service to you. And so the lessons that I've learned also can be of benefit to you so that you can remain competitive in the global market. And those are the 3 tips of changing your mindset. In other words, let go of a traditional model of, looking at whatever that traditional model is for you, to let that go. Be open to new things, what is happening now, or what is new to, whatever is new for your particular business. Take proper action. And what that means is being able to leverage the particular opportunities for your business. But thirdly, research is still important. Because one of the things, just a recent conversation where someone says, oh, I want to go to this particular country. And I'm thinking, this is not something that you just do. You still need the research. Why that particular market? What is going on? What's the demand in that market? Who's demanding what in that particular market? And then what are some of the policies that may make it easier or difficult to get your product into that particular market? So having said that, I hope that you found this information helpful. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks with the next episode of GRIT Group Live. Thank you for your time. I'm just going to check briefly to see if anyone has any questions. This is also a time to ask any questions. So let me just get over here and see. Oh, wow. Okay. So, wow. Okay, so thank you for the people who went on and liked what I'm talking about. Again, I'm always happy to see when people catch me live. Let's see, I don't see any questions. Let me just make sure. But if even after this live session, it will appear on my Facebook Live. I will also put it on the YouTube channel and my Instagram channel. And you can always raise questions in the comment sections even after this live session. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing all of you in 2 weeks. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you soon. Again, Sarita Jackson, President and CEO of the Global Research Institute of International Trade. Bye-bye.